February 26th, Bill Foster will abandon his car and decide he's had enough of life in the 90s. In the one movie critics say everyone will be talking about, Falling Down.
Welcome to Roll Credits, a podcast about connections, both in film and in life. I'm Aaron.
I'm Mandy.
In each episode, we aim to explore a cast member, director, or even a concept that ties a set of movies together. We talk about the history and the context of a movie and have fun while discussing our own personal opinions. This is, of course, as always, an Armbar Studios production. For more information about all of our projects, including this podcast, you can always go to armbarstudios.com. So this is part 3 of our Joel Schumacher arc, covering the director himself. This is Falling Down, a movie that was released, what year was this one? 1993, I believe? Yes, 1993? Yeah, 1993.
Hold on a second.
You know, I'm going to say it's 1993 because guess what? I watched the Siskel and Ebert episode.
It was 1993.
Yes. I watched the Siskel and Ebert episode where they talked about the 1993 Oscars, so I'm counting it. Anyway, this is an arc as part of the Joel Schumacher arc. We have covered St. Elmo's Fire. We have covered The Lost Boys. Listen to that episode if you haven't. It's one of my personal favorites we've done. Now it's Falling Down, and following this, we're going to be doing Batman Forever, Phantom of the Opera, and the number 23. So, Falling Down. First,
we have a lot to talk about when the Batman Forever episode drops, by the way.
We've had
that film has gotten a cultural resurgence as of late for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, we actually watched a film called The People's Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, beautiful film. I just want
to
call that one out. It actually pays tribute to Joel Schumacher with the first frame.
Yeah.
Most of that is because the film very heavily references Batman Forever, but it dedicates the film to Mom and Joel Schumacher.
Which, yeah, very interesting two-punch of people to credit, but, I respect it, given the content of the film. Yeah, so that'll be fun to talk about. As for Falling Down, and, well, as for us, what have we been up to lately? We've watched some good movies lately. We always do.
Like The People's Joker.
Yeah, like The People's Joker. There you go.
My life is boring, personally.
How dare you? So, yeah, pretty fun time in terms of our media consumption habits. And, of course, the latest film that we've watched is Falling Down itself. For those who've never seen Falling Down, of course, we always recommend you watch the movies before you listen to us. But hopefully listening to us at least entertains you. It is the tale of a man who has a license plate D-Fens. He's a disillusioned middle-class guy who, when stuck in traffic one day, decides he's had enough. And he goes on a rampage through society with the feds hot on his tail. Now,
I believe this is Joel's first real thriller film. Looking at it, this is his first thriller.
Well, The Lost Boys was a pure horror. Comedy horror.
And then we've had... So there was Incredible Shrinking Woman. That was more of a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
There was St. Elmo's Fire, which was kind of a drama comedy.
Ish.
And then even going forward, this is the first true thriller film, I would call it. And that is actually, I'd say, one of Joel's bigger genres going forward from here.
It is interesting.
Yeah. Falling Down, huge film at the time. You're probably going to go into the feedback that they've gotten.
Very
the reviews.
Very interesting critical reviews. I have some interesting things that I want to point out. Very polarizing film, because I feel that it's a movie that can be read multiple different ways, and there's a lot that kind of hinges on that.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to that. Let me get into the history so I can place you right here in the scene.
Please do.
For my information on this one, I do just want to mention I used an interview by Michael Douglas from AV Club, as well as a sit-down interview by Joel Schumacher with film critic Bobby Wygant. This was an older one that was around the time that Falling Down actually came out, so it was fresh at the time.
Okay.
You may ask, how did we get here? The Lost Boys was a phenomenon on top of overall positive reviews, including the accolade of winning Saturn Awards Best Horror Film in 1987.
Hell yeah.
The film had a budget of $8.5 million, and it grossed $32.2 million, according to the box office website. So it made back double its budgets once you take into consideration that half of that went into the box office, or just about double. So at this point, Joel did not have a single financial flop to his name as a director. I'm speaking financially.
Yeah, of course.
And his simple strategy of making the movie that he wanted to watch was paying off. A lot of people wanted to see the movies that he was making, and with The Lost Boys and St. Elmo's Fire, his name really broke through to the mainstream. Now, he did miss 1988, but once 1989 rolled around, it was film released every year until 92 for him. So there was the 1989 film Cousins. It was an American remake of a French film called Cousine, about two cousins by marriage who have an affair. Crazy enough, well, we keep mentioning Siskel and Ebert on this podcast. We're fans.
Yeah. We like Siskel and Ebert. Like that's the reason why we bring up use them as kind of the contemporary example. To me, like, not only were they were the predominant voice in film criticism, I also think that they're a great resource to break apart both positive and negative as as personalities and as film critics. And I don't think it's wrong to say that we were very influenced by them and continue to be influenced by them in how we do our things.
Not at all, but it is funny to mention that we're fans of Siskel and Ebert. We're also huge fans of Joel Schumacher, and
were not.
And we were also huge fans of horror. We're like huge fans of the horror genre. And, I don't believe the criticism that Siskel and Ebert hate horror, but, it is probably one of the most popular things you hear repeated.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit about it last episode with The Lost Boys, where, you look at their track record of the movies that were big with audiences, but they did not like. And, you get kind of this narrative that isn't quite true, but is very interesting. But actually, it's funny you mention that, because I'm actually going to go into a little bit of just an aside when we get to the reviews about Siskel and Ebert and their opinions on horror. But go on.
Well, the reason I bring them up, I actually watched Siskel and Ebert's review of Cousins.
Oh, okay.
They both gave it a thumbs up. Neither of them credited Joel as the reason the movie was good. They actually gave credit to the actors and the script by Stephen Metcalf.
We get that a lot, don't we? We're like, oh, the cinematographer by this guy. And listen, I think it's awesome that they are putting a lot of faith in and spotlight on lesser talked about members of the movie crew. But they do put the failures of movies like St. Elmo's Fire at Joel's feet.
Right. So I'd consider this like a half victory on Schumacher's part if he was really aiming for, the Siskel and Ebert vote. But, he's also getting like a ton of money no matter what. So I don't think he cares that deeply. 1990, he dropped Flatliners, a film that we've both seen. Speaking of horror,
would you not consider that a thriller of any kind?
I would say that is horror. Like that is science fiction horror.
If we're going to split horror and thriller and all that, okay, I understand what you're saying here.
To me,
I'm not here to argue genre semantics.
To me, Alfred Hitchcock is thriller, and then I would say Flatliners, even like Jaws, is horror to me.
Okay, fair enough.
No matter what Spielberg might say.
You're wrong, buddy.
So Flatliners is a science fiction horror about young medical students trying to figure out if there's an afterlife by doing experiments to kill themselves and then resurrect, basically seeing how long they can hold their breath underwater. He brought back Kiefer Sutherland for that and then filled out the rest of the cast with the likes of Julia Roberts, Kevin Bacon, Oliver Platt, William Baldwin, just a very stacked cast.
Yeah.
And I love how it is in many ways like a Frankenstein story, where their own fascination is the real conflict of the story.
And we've talked about Flatliners because we've both seen it, and we talk a lot about its set design and how you can see a lot of like, I think you can draw a line from things like Lost Boys, Flatliners, and even this movie to what he would eventually do in Batman, because of just how beautiful and gothic the story of Flatliners is, and how the set design and kind of aesthetic eye matches that.
It really is, like, you look at those two films and then you look at Batman Forever. They really do complement each other, shockingly enough. That said, reviews were pretty mixed on that one, mixed and negative. I enjoyed it personally.
Yeah, I mean, I would not consider it one of his best. I would consider it an inventive film worth watching.
It's no Lost Boys, but it's worth a look for unique horror.
Yeah.
And then his last film before this one was called Dying Young, starring, once again, Julia Roberts. That one was a critical bomb, but a financial success. So that leads us to today's film, Falling Down.
Mm-hmm.
So how Michael Douglas got involved with this movie was through Joel. So Douglas was actually the producer on Flatliners. And Joel thought that he would be perfect to play Defense, the central antagonist.
That's interesting. Okay.
That said, according to Douglas, the film was originally planned to be a TV movie and then wound up getting a theatrical release instead.
Wait, so that's really cool. So it was kind of made with a TV movie budget in mind?
Yeah, they were going to do like a low budget thing. This was meant to be entirely a smaller production. And then, well, I here's the thing. Some of this stuff is going to get into hearsay because you have to take this with a grain of salt. I was really digging deeply for this film.
Okay.
The most I could find for more information was on websites called Geeky Whale and 80s Kids.
Oh, boy.
So they alleged a few things about the production progress. They said that Douglas actually saved this film once it came into his hands because it was turned down by every major studio. Also, there's a couple more people who were considered for William Foster before Douglas got the role. Among them, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Mel Gibson, Robin Williams, Harrison Ford, Jack Nicholson, Ed Harris, Michael Keaton.
I don't believe a damn thing. I'm sorry. I mean, far be it for me to doubt geekywhales.com. And I admit, a Robin Williams headed Falling Down sounds fascinating. But I mean, we're getting into the we're getting into the Gilver or whatever the hell that movie was.
Well, that's the thing. Like, they might as well just put Chris Farley's name here, too.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, they were going to get Chris Farley to play Michael Douglas, and Falling Down was going to be a comedy. You could just say that.
Oh, and now you're going to die with that little hat on. You freaking idiot! Dustin Hoffman, Alec Baldwin, and Jeff Bridges were all here. But, that when somebody says, like, they consider this person for the role, this literally could have been as simple as, oh, you think Dustin Hoffman would be good for this? Nah. Like, that is a consideration in my eyes.
Big rumor as Falling Down protagonist, his original license plate read Sorbus.
Oh, and in order to get the film made, this is another thing I heard, is Douglas apparently took a pay cut.
Okay.
Which, that one's fairly believable.
Yeah, if it was if the TV movie thing was correct, that makes sense.
Finally, and this one is probably the most interesting out of all of them, because this one is, again, could be complete BS, but this one is something that I would like to see. Maybe not as much as what we had, what the final product is, but I'm curious to see what his ideas would have been. Allegedly, before Joel got the directing spot, Dennis Hopper was allegedly set to direct it. Dennis Hopper, obviously famous actor, also director of the film Easy Rider.
Oh yeah, of course, Dennis Hopper from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and Super Mario Brothers 1993, the only movies he's known for. No, yeah, we've seen Easy Rider. Easy Rider is an American classic, and his direction is incredible. So that would have been interesting for sure. Shame there's no real source on that, because I mean, for all we know, we could be regurgitating BS. But you know what?
I really tried to find a source on that one, because
we're not letting facts get in the way of a good story. We could have had Bowser's falling down.
Look, Dennis, buddy.
He does a lot of falling down.
Hold on, is Dennis Hopper still alive?
No, he died pretty recently.
Oh.
I know.
I was going to say, so Dennis Hopper probably won't be able to confirm this.
Yes, unfortunate.
Michael Douglas, buddy, if you have any information that could tie Dennis Hopper to this film, please let us know.
Please.
Anyways, back to what I can tell you is true.
Mm-hmm.
Filming happened to be around spring of 1992 in Los Angeles, where one day of filming had to be cut early because of the Rodney King riots were in full swing.
Oh my God. This is a fascinating film to talk about sociologically, because I don't think I'm going to be able to get to this. I'm going to bring up something in Siskel and Ebert's actual episode on the movies. And yes, I'm going to talk about some things, but there's some things I want to talk about more than this. So I'm going to slide this in here. There's a scene in Falling Down where, it's the fast food scene. Gene Siskel said that scene was, quote, in poor taste because there had been recent mass shootings at fast food places. What the hell is with this movie?
Also, it deals with a lot of difficult subject matter.
Yeah.
I think one thing that was said even by Bobby Weigart when she was interviewing Joel was that the movie reminded her of the riots and just how that happened.
Right.
I think, there was a lot of stuff going down around the 92 to 93 time frame.
Well, think about Do the Right Thing as well, or Dog Day Afternoon. I think that heat waves in general are really ripe for kind of being that thing that stokes dissension of all kinds and frustrations, because like things are already annoying and then you make it really hot and sticky, everyone's going to be pissed off.
And you know what? You're right. There was a lot of people who were looking at this film in a negative light because of stuff like that. One thing I actually want to mention, a big hit on this film was the scene with the Korean store. It actually got it banned in South Korea.
Oh, wow.
There were protests by the Korean American Coalition and also the Korean Grocers Association that worked to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, Schumacher and Douglas both tried to talk about why they felt it was important to the movie. But unfortunately, again, this film was being filmed during the LA riots, and there were actually Korean casualties in the LA riots. So between that, everybody just thought, oh, unfortunately, this was like in poor taste.
Yeah, and the thing is, look, I was 2 years old in 1993. I'm not going to tell you how to or how not to feel about this film contemporarily or even nowadays, but I will tell you what I feel about this film, and I think that that's worth kind of picking apart, and I think is interesting too. But yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Michael Douglas's father, Kirk, actually went to the paper to defend the film and everything. Like, yeah,
I forgot that
there
were
some
Kirk Douglas's son.
That's
Kirk Douglas, famously the last name of the Proto-Men member, the Gambler.
And also there were a lot of people who thought, for whatever reason, that Dee Fens was meant to be the hero of the movie.
Yeah.
Which
we'll talk about that.
that is rough.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can blame Joel or anybody else for that.
I just think it's the time of the time. I think this is a societal and perspective thing.
So aside from making a lot of movies, there wasn't a lot of notes about what was happening in Joel Schumacher's life, at least from what I can tell, these last couple of years. The one thing I do want to mention here, this will be kind of the final note for the history section. Michael Douglas actually talks about his recollection of Joel in the interview.
Oh.
He talked about how Joel was just extremely easy to work with. He liked to keep things moving, and he was a smart, funny guy who really loved his actors and constantly encouraged people. Even like Joel was talking about directing Michael Douglas. And as far as he was concerned, like, he almost felt like he was too good, like they were all too good for him. He was like, he basically just watched them be at work. So sometimes Michael Douglas talked about how sometimes they had to like go to Joel, say, hey, we should probably get this from another scene, because he just wanted to keep things moving.
Yeah.
You know, call it inexperience, call it really trusting your workers. Either way, Joel was several films in, but this was really his big critical hit as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'll pass it along to you. You probably have a lot of information there, plus also the physical release.
Yes. So we're going into our segment, which is called At the Movies at the Time, to kind of go through here. This one is fascinating because I did watch the episode of At the Movies with this review. In fact, this is the second time I've watched it, because the first time we watched Falling Down, which was one of our little 2-part movie nights that we like to do. We watched it afterwards. And so I watched it again more recently. And I'm going to be honest, normally I get quotes from both of those guys like on this show. I'd like to summarize these, because I think the most interesting quote does not come from the show, but I think that Roger Ebert in his text review talks a lot, like for that he did for the newspaper, talks a lot more about this movie in really interesting depth. So
okay.
It was actually a split decision. Gene Siskel did not like this movie. He did not like this movie because I don't think he understood it. But that's me editorializing. Let's talk about what he actually said. He compared this to a movie from the 60s called Joe, which is about, an angry guy, going on a rampage, basically. He compared it unfavorably to it, saying Joe was a better movie. From what I can tell, Joe is a heroic figure, so take that as you will. He talked a little bit more just about how, again, the fast food scene he felt was in poor taste. And in general, he just found that Michael Douglas wasn't that interesting.
That is insane to
me. I know. Which, Ebert very much disagreed with, because Ebert defended the film. But there's some other things. I want to talk a little bit about the episode in question, because I do actually find this to be very, very interesting. They reviewed it around Army of Darkness, The Temp, and they talked about the 1993 Oscars. The Temp seemed like an interesting movie. Army of Darkness, they were both not fond of, because their video pick of the week was Evil Dead 2, which they said, for horror fans, it's one of the funniest movies of recent years. And he's right, Evil Dead 2 is awesome. So y'all who think that Ebert hates horror, you're wrong. Have it in his own words. Evil Dead 2 is great. But yeah, so basically...
I kind of love Army of Darkness too, but
yeah,
I can understand it's a step down.
That's basically what Ebert felt. He was like, look, it's a step down. It's just not as good. Bruce Campbell's great. The skeletons are fun, but it's just not as fun. The special effects are great, but it just didn't quite make it. But this isn't about Evil Dead 2. This is about Falling Down. Again, Siskel compared to Joe, he called it a series of fireworks. Like, the point is you're watching this movie and waiting for him to lash out on a guy, and that's the point of the movie. Obviously, that's not the point of the movie. But if you think that Michael Douglas is the hero, then that is the point of the movie. Like, what are you watching, Tourette's guy? Or, I swear to God, there was, like, some kind of flash animation that was just this, but the guy was a hero for, like, it's like you go to get a burger and you shoot a guy or whatever for putting pickles on your burger or something. It was those edgy Newgrounds things. Yeah. Everyone made them. They were a dime a dozen of just edgy teenagers pissed off at things that are minor inconveniences.
I Hate My Dad.
Yeah, I Hate My Dad movies. So if you take this as a I Hate My Dad movie, no wonder you're not going to fucking get it. But Ebert had these great, interesting long form feelings. So I'm gonna single out a few lines and quotes that I felt were really interesting. So first, I want to say thank you to Siskel Ebert, SiskelEbert.org, as usual, for archiving the episode itself, and of course RogerEbert.com is where you can see most of the reviews that that Ebert wrote for the newspaper. But here's some very interesting little pulls. If this film had been made 10 or 20 years ago, it might have been an audience pleaser in which we cheered as the white hero shot up druggies or got vengeance on rapists. Schumacher and his screenwriter, Eb Rose Smith, have not made a revenge movie, and this film isn't constructed to inspire cheers when Douglas pulls the trigger. Maybe it will play that way for some audiences, but more thoughtful viewers are more likely to pick up on Douglas's ennui, his soul sickness that has turned to madness, his bafflement at becoming obsolete and irrelevant. Because the character is white, and many of his targets are not, this movie could be read as racist. I prefer to think of it as a reflection of the real feelings of a lot of people who, lacking the insight to see how political and economic philosophies have affected them, fall back on easy scapegoating. If you don't have a job and the Korean shop owner does, it's easy to see him as the villain. It takes a little more imagination to realize that you lost your job because of the greedy and unsound financial gains of the go-go junk bond years. Schumacher does not build to some kind of easy audience-pleasing climax. The way the movie ends is the way it must, in real life, not the way it would in Death Wish 7. And the values and style of the Duvall character reflect not a triumphant cop, but simply a guy who still believes in trying to roll with the punches and make the best of things. Falling Down does a good job of representing a real feeling in society today. It would be a shame if it is seen only on a superficial level.
Ebert, you have redeemed yourself for the Lost Boys. Gene Siskel, I'll see you back for Batman Forever. You know?
So yeah, he rated that 3 stars and gave it a thumbs up on the show. Perfectly acceptable, very good review. Not just because, he agrees with us. But I do think that it's a film that deserves to be taken as more than just, Death Wish 7, as he put it. And I think that's very interesting because if you connect back to how Ebert was viewing The Lost Boys, he viewed The Lost Boys, even if he didn't totally recommend it, as an update of exploitation movies given kind of the 80s coat of paint and turned into something with better acting, with strong story and character and dialogue, Even if he didn't love the movie, he still understood that that's kind of what it is. And I think that Falling Down kind of follows a very similar thing, but as a 90s movie. You're looking at it as, this is going to be the white guy gets revenge movie. This is going to be the I don't want to compare it to like Office Space. It's not like I've seen Office Space and that's a comedy, but Death Wish or the aforementioned Joe are 2 movies that he specifically name dropped. Whereas you give it this new kind of interesting coat of paint that dares to think bigger than just the basics. Also, interestingly, he did mention Joel Schumacher as a director, talking about the opening scene and compared it to 8.5. A movie that we have not seen yet, but every single person who has ever visited the Criterion Closet says is one of the best movies ever made. So we should probably watch it at some point.
Amen. Yeah, I'm excited to get into the opening scene because I loved it too.
Now, before we get there, 2 things. I promised you a fun fact, and I'm amazed you didn't run into this. So, want to know who else has opinions on this movie? I assume they're positive opinions because things went well. So, current vice presidential nominee Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, according to a report by the Minnesota Star Tribune, where they interviewed his wife Gwen, Tim took his now wife to Falling Down on their first date and then ate at Hardee's.
Oh, man.
So, Tim, if you're listening, tell us what you thought of it. Email us.
Tim, buddy, I'll accept you on the podcast.
Yeah, come on, Tim. Call in, buddy. We can talk about Quick Trip. Let's talk a little bit. We watched this movie. We're going to get physical. So let's get physical. Physical. We watched this movie on what is apparently, to my knowledge, the best way to watch this movie.
Which is very funny.
Yeah, which is very funny because it's kind of a crappy Blu-ray. Like, it's super quiet. It looks fine. But like to my knowledge, it has all the special features you could want. So it does have well, one, it opens with an ad for Blu-ray itself, Blu-rays themselves. So it's an early Blu-ray. You hit the top menu button, it takes you to the special features menu, where you can either resume the menu or turn on the commentary with Michael Douglas and Joel Schumacher. So it does have a good commentary. You can also watch an interview that Michael Douglas did or watch a trailer for the movie. So basically the audio is really quiet. The video looked great. It's a good way to watch the movie, but it has not had any kind of update since. So this is my plea, Criterion Collection or whoever, Shout Factory.
Anybody, but, I think this film does deserve a Criterion release.
I would love that. I genuinely would love that. Like, that's kind of one thing that kind of came to my mind as I was watching it. We're not snobs when it comes to the Criterion Collection. A lot of my Criterion jokes are because I think they're funny. But when I say I want Napoleon Dynamite in the Criterion Collection, I'm being 100% serious here. And I think this movie would be amazing as a Criterion release. Like, if they could update it, get all those features, get some new features, get an essay, get the, I don't know, I guess there would be film elements to get the 4K, because this movie is gorgeous, as most of Schumacher's movies are. So yeah, the ball's in your court, guys. The ball is in your court.
Don't mess this up.
Don't mess this up. And speaking of Criterion, speaking of falling down, and speaking of the opening scene, let's get into it. Let's talk about it. The traffic jam that started it all.
Oh, man. So, you mentioned, before I get into that, you mentioned that we watched this just as a movie night. It is funny how I didn't even run into this film for many, many years. Like, there had been pop culture references that I found to Falling Down.
Frank Grimes
from The Simpsons is based on Michael Douglas.
Which is hilarious, because that's like my least favorite episode of The Simpsons.
I've never seen the Foo Fighters music video Walk, but apparently that one is like a huge Falling Down reference from what I could find. It was a big film for the 90s at the time. At the very least, it was a popular film. It did very well. So, our opening credits roll as everybody is stuck in traffic. The themes of anger with consumerism in modern America is here, and it is absolutely hilarious.
This is claustrophobic and sweaty and disgusting. It opens on a shot of Defenz's sneering lips, and that man is sweating. And I gotta give an immediate shout out, because you want to know a movie that understood what the 90s really looked like? It was brown. Everything in the 90s was brown. This was a Call of Duty map era. This was a fucking frosted glass cup at Golden Corral, ugly plastic trays. This place...
Oh, don't forget the Garfield window plushes.
The Garfield window plushes.
Like, they should have shown the Kelvin pissing.
Oh my God.
Decal.
Yeah. They really should have. You're absolutely right. Like, this movie, people talk about the 90s, and trust me, there were things in the 90s that did look crazy and colorful and wacky, but most of society was brown. And it smelled like cigarette smoke. I know, because I was there.
I was there too. Only for about 6 years. I was very tiny during it, but I remember it.
Baby.
So there was, we get like a bus full of kids screaming and throwing trash, literally while an American flag is on the bus.
The noise pollution is so good.
People are on their cell phones in 93. And then also we get bumper stickers like, how's my driving? Call 1-800-EAT-SHIT.
Yes. And that is like one of the best parts, because after all of this, the thing that really sets him off, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is there's a fly in his car. There's a fly in his car, and he's not going out the window because he can't roll the window down. The
straw that broke the camel's back. It's always like the smallest things. I'm with it. Yeah, like... I love how ugly the depiction is at the start. It reminds me a little bit of So this is a movie that we reviewed, but not for this podcast. Our one episode of Cinema Gratuita up, which was a podcast we did with our friend Joe, had the film Highway to Hell.
Yes.
In that, the version of hell that they depict is basically a freeway with just a shit ton of traffic.
Yeah, just tons of traffic and terrible tourist traps.
It is hilarious. Very strong movie. I'd recommend that podcast.
Yeah,
that's
a fun episode. We did it a few years back. It's on our website, armbarstudios.com. Fun movie. And it is kind of funny that, this same movie kind of shows that same sort of disgust and frustration with the traffic. It's the evil of America is the traffic jam.
And this is, at least in the start of this, kind of a viewpoint movie. Mm-hmm. As things go on, we do that image that you see of the viewpoint of Defense, or William Foster, as he is later known, just slowly unravels, and we get to see more of the world. The world becomes a little more realistic, but they never shy away from the ugliness in society.
And that's something that I really love, because shortly after we're introduced to Defense, after he leaves his car in the middle of the road and goes for his walk, we see the cop,
Duval.
Prendergast is the character's name. And, Robert Duvall comes onto the scene, and we meet him. And I had forgotten that he shows up so early.
It is cool that you see both protagonists of the movie. The protagonist and the antagonist, the two viewpoint characters,
yes,
I should say.
And here's the cool thing. Every time we're with Michael Douglas, with Defense, everything is kind of that brown, that sweaty, that claustrophobic, tight shots, Dutch angles. Like, everything feels really uncomfortable and really stressful. Joel shoots Michael Douglas and Robert Duvall so differently. Not too differently. I'm not going to say that there's like some wildly different shooting style between the two characters, but visually, you understand so much of each character's mindset with how he shoots both of their scenes. Because with, there's so much focus on this sort of claustrophobic or even the murals, the art, the things that Joel shows you from Michael Douglas's perspective versus the things that, Robert Duvall's character is much less self-centered, is how I would put it. Michael Douglas, everything surrounds Michael Douglas. Everything is about Michael Douglas. Everything is from what Michael Douglas sees.
It's very focused in and intense.
Yes. Whereas with Robert Duvall's character, you see the police station, you see his wife and his interactions, you see his interactions with his boss, and there's a little bit more color. Things are still very suburban and very brown. That was the 90s. But there's more life in Prendergast's life than there is in Defense's, and that's, I think, very intentional, an intentional directorial decision by Joel.
So, as soon as he finishes his walk, he picks up a Coke at the local grocery store or convenience store.
And let me just tell you, that's one thing. Oh my God, Michael Douglas's performance in this movie is incredible. It is a masterful performance. I love how unnatural he feels. His shirt is buttoned all the way up. His tie is like super straight, and he's walking just measured like a fucking Terminator.
It's funny. They actually said that he was meant to be somebody out of the 50s in terms of his design. This is something Joel has echoed. This is something the screenwriter has echoed. And this is something that the William Foster himself has echoed, Mr. Michael Douglas.
And the
one thing they always bring up is literally like, oh, the haircut. The haircut is hilarious.
Yeah.
And depending on the story, they either modeled the haircut after somebody that Douglas knew in real life, or they modeled the haircut. They were just trying with the haircuts. The designer came up with it,
right?
Basically,
yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. I do actually like the idea there. Very very 50s. That makes a lot of sense. Someone kind of left behind, but also someone who has not grown, as we'll talk about. And I think that is itself a very important thing, that if Michael Douglas has not grown into the modern day, then those are the issues that he's going to be facing. And by the way, I just want to say, speaking of things that are just kind of funny now, there's a very brief scene with Michael Douglas's character on a payphone. Nothing wrong with a payphone, calling his wife. And his wife is coming home with groceries. And you hear the phone ringing from the house, and she's like, "Oh, the phone," and has to hurry into the house to pick up the phone before it stops ringing. Man, those were the days, huh? Instead of having to pick up your phone, you're like, "Oh man, I can hear the phone in the house. I better hurry up in the house." But yes, the convenience store.
Oh man, so I don't feel comfortable speaking on whether or not something is offensive.
Yeah.
That is going to be up to the
We are
person,
not Korean.
The
We are not, I am not an expert here.
There is a lot. The most I'll say, things might seem. I did feel that sometimes it felt a little stereotypical with the Latino gang members, and that was at the same time, the girlfriend of the gang members, Detective Sandra, those are two minorities I would say are massive parts of the cast, meant to be the most likable characters.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think all of Joel's movies tend to have a degree of exaggeration in them. I mean, think about St. Elmo's Fire and Mr. Kim, the criminal businessman. What the hell was that?
Yeah,
so
you know what? That one's
stuff.
There's a good point with that.
Yeah.
I'll say that if there's one person for sure I think should take offense, it's anybody who has William Foster's viewpoint. And holy hell, does it feel almost too relevant nowadays.
Oh, God, yes.
We have...
He's a racist!
Yeah, he says the Koreans are stealing his jobs. And he was getting mad at them because they had him pay 85 cents for a Coke can.
Which is hilarious, because 85 cents for a can of Coke is a bargain these days.
He said, "No, I'm going to be paying 50 cents for this."
I can't root for this guy. He's racist.
I think one of the most insane moments of this part, he actually asked the Korean cashier, "Oh, do you know how much money my country gave your country?"
Yeah.
And then the cashier is like, "No, how much?" And he doesn't know the answer.
Yeah, he doesn't even know what he's arguing against. He just wants to lash out because he's being angry and racist and doesn't know where to direct his ire. And that is the entire point of the movie.
It is insane how that never died too. It highlights a hatred that America had and still has to immigrants. And the 85 cents for Coke, how often do we hear prices have gone up? It's horrible.
Inflation this. So what was it? The Joe Biden stickers people slapped on gas stations that pointed at the high price and said, "I did that."
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning, there's literally nothing stopping William Foster from just leaving and going to a different store for this Coke can. Yeah. Right? He's already inside. The cashier doesn't tell him buy something or get out of here. He's
just here's the price. This is what I'm charging. This is what it costs.
I feel, if anything, there are some sections later that maybe Duvall's character could have been nicer to the cashier, but I think that is probably the most I'll say with regards to the cashier person. Again, I understand if maybe this is too much for you. I will say that the film probably has the cashier more in its sympathies than Foster.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is that
And I don't think a lot of people saw that.
Exactly, because, as Ebert himself said, people are going to have polarizing reactions to this movie. But no, I agree. I feel that in the end, that is kind of the truth, is that, this movie is not on William Foster's side. It understands him and it breaks him down, but it is not on his side. And it is not a cool, good thing that he steals Mr. Kim's bat and starts beating up on his bread and smashing his merchandise so that he can get a cheaper Coke.
I mean, you look at it, man, he's pathetic, he's xenophobic, he's not saying this is entirely the worst thing, he's also extremely divorced.
Yeah, he's extremely divorced. He goes into this convenience store and is like so mad that this Coke is expensive that he steals the guy's bat. And is like, you think I'm a thief? I'm not the one charging 85 cents for a stinking soda. And it's like, you are blaming the wrong guy here. And that is, I think, again, the point.
Yeah, it needs to be viewed as kind of this killing joke thing in a way. At least that's how it feels. That from the start of it. He's a loser who's having one really bad day. And it just keeps ramping up.
Yeah, and it's just sort of, again, everything around Foster, around Defense, is so greasy and smoky and yellow and choking. And then, you go to Prendergast and everything around him is, still very corporate, still very boxy, but at the very least it's full of people.
He's handling it very well. He's being brought over, he's being forced to retire.
Yeah, he's being forced to retire, and his boss is
kind of an asshole.
Kind of an asshole who doesn't really appreciate him.
Doesn't appreciate him, but also will take advantage of him.
Yes, exactly. And, and then we get to, he's talking about, I'm retiring, and, well, we had a guy who died the day of his retirement, be careful, don't die before your retirement, it's kind of the joke. And then we get this really, really powerful scene of Duvall, of Prendergast, calling his wife, which is it's again, these are two people, both with a hard lot on their life, in their own ways. And you have, William Foster calling his wife, who he is separated from, and he wants to go home. And it's creepy. Meanwhile, you have, Prendergast calling his wife, and his wife is very clearly not doing well. She's undergone some kind of mental break, and it's very upsetting. And yet, Duvall is doing his best to encourage her, to talk her through this, to help her out, And it's tough because, he has his own life, his own job, but he understands that, in order to get through all of this, he does need to understand where his wife is coming from and why she is how she is. And you do find out more about, Prendergast's life, before his retirement, and, he and his wife. And it's very, very interesting. So.
It does feel like he is being, not to get too much into that, he is being very self-sacrificial.
Yes.
And that is largely because one of the few things that he covets, and this is even more than his job, is his wife.
Yes.
His life at home.
Yeah. His life at home, he does, despite everything, he has his life at home. He has his wife that he does genuinely love, despite, frustrations, despite it maybe not always being perfect. Like, he does love that. And, his life isn't his job. And this is really interesting because in this conversation with him, I did not realize, as I know this sounds so stupid, somehow I never put two and two together that the title of the movie was Because London Bridge is Falling Down.
It even goes as far as
like he sings the song to his wife to calm her down.
And the ending credits, literally the last thing you hear in the ending credits is the music box. So, yeah, no, there's a lot of references to London Bridges falling down all throughout it, specifically the song. Obviously, the title is double literal, but that is... but they don't shy away from it. It's kind of an easy grab. It's like when they do Spider-Man. They always have to include the itsy bitsy spider.
Yeah. So one thing I really love about this movie, I apologize that if it seems like we're kind of jumping around here, but I think that it's important to understand that this movie is so relentless in its pace because it is a giant chain reaction.
You do have to think about this film like it is one person trying to figure out this criminal, trying to catch this criminal, but they also have to figure out that this is the same guy.
Yeah, and it's really cool because it really is. Traditionally, Lance Storm, the pro wrestler, talked about booking an angle and why storylines in pro wrestling are called angles. It's because you have two people on a straight line and they meet. And that point where they meet is the angle. And that is this movie. You have these two characters. One of them, by leaving his car, he starts this chain reaction that it's this domino effect as he upgrades his weapon, which is hilarious because he goes from the briefcase to the bat to the gun. It's great. But, it's causing this kind of domino effect. It's a domino effect of a movie, which I think serves the entire story of the movie. Because you go back further, it's like this domino effect of William Foster and his, struggles in his job, or his marriage. And it's like this domino effect that led to him being stuck in traffic, that led to him leaving his car, that led to him, the cops seeing that he left his car, that led to him robbing the store. He's not a robber.
He is not a robber.
He's not a robber. He's just okay.
He makes that very clear.
Vandalizing the store. That leads to him, sitting in the field and meeting the gang members, which leads to the gang members shooting up another store. It's this domino effect of what happens if someone just breaks kind of the lets all of society's tiny frustrations get to them to the point that they push over that domino to the detriment of everybody else.
Yes.
And it's great.
He goes on an unhinged odyssey.
Yeah.
And then we have just like the detective story. They could easily have just focused on one or the other.
Yeah.
But, how their dueling narratives come together eventually is fantastic. Back to where William Foster is, coming away from the Korean store. I believe the next major thing we see is him going to the park. And, we actually see injustices here. Vets being homeless. There are homeless people dying of AIDS. Cops in the park.
Yeah. And oh my God, the art in this movie. Again, Joel doing what he does best and finding really cool places to shoot. There is so much interesting street art in this movie.
Oh, also, don't forget the economically viable, the not economically viable protester.
Yeah.
He literally says, "Don't forget me" to Foster early on in the movie, which works very well for when you hear the term "not economically viable" later on. It's so good.
And it's basically a protester in front of a bank. I believe he's protesting losing his job. Talking about being not economically viable. He eventually gets arrested, and that's what he says to Foster is, "Don't forget me." And around this time, I believe this is when Defense gets accosted by the gang members in the field. And there are a bunch of Latino gang members, and this is this domino kind of pushes the forward the story in Prendergast's story, because, to put a long story short, the gang members, they accost.
They try and shoot him up.
Yeah, they try and shoot him up. Basically,
they end up crashing the car.
Yeah, they try and run a drive-by on a store where Foster is, after they kind of get into a fight into a field. During that, Foster gets a butterfly knife. It's funny because in this movie, let me tell you, in the fighting game that we talked about, William Foster's going to have a move set where you can continually upgrade his weapons with each new bar, because he goes from like bat to knife to gun.
He is the weapons master character.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, basically they try and shoot up the store that he's at, and there's this insane shot of just all the gang members dying after a huge car crash, and there's like a mural of Jesus in the background. Joel, what the hell were you on, man? Oh, it's crazy. And again, that kind of goes into that whole sort of, this domino effect of what is going to happen when it all, like I said, I think, oh my God, and that's the entire point. Like, London Bridge is falling down. What caused London Bridge to fall down? It's a loose brick, isn't it? And one by one, it's brick by brick, everything comes crumbling down.
It's so good.
Oh, it's so good.
Another scene I really like around this part was the man begging for money. And he's obviously like lying, and that's like the major part of it.
Hey,
yeah,
buddy,
he has food in his hand, and he's saying he hasn't eaten a meal in 3 days. He's eventually begs defense, like, it's not fair. You're holding 2 bags. One of them is a bag full of guns he got from the gang members.
Members, yeah.
And then defense gives him his other briefcase. It turns out it literally just has his lunch in it.
And it has a sandwich and an apple, and the apple goes rolling away.
And he throws back the food in anger.
Yeah.
The person who was begging for food, quote unquote.
And that's its own interesting thing, because, what I think it is, one of those things where it's like, now, to get philosophical here, if someone's begging you for money, they could be lying, or they could be truthful. Everyone in this movie pretty much had some kind of life-altering event. And I think what it is kind of a discussion of how do you react to both life-altering events and the small things, and how the small things affect your views on those life-altering events. Because like you said in the park, there's a guy here who specifically has a sign saying, he's dying from AIDS. You have, the veterans. You have this guy who's kind of a panhandler. And it's interesting.
There's a lot of gray area in this film, which I really like because it feels very realistic, right? I could call William Foster the antagonist, and that is 100% true, at least from a story term perspective. And, he has definitely a lot of flaws. Yeah. There's always going to be people who are worse than him, and there are many people who are better than him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a rampaging asshole who is racist, and you actually see as he judges, like, other races, the homeless. Like, that's the thing. A lot of these shots, again, are from his perspective, and you can kind of tell in defense's, like, eyes, oh, look at these bastards, So, of course, he would get to the man who is homeless and trying to swindle him out of his money. And it's like, well, you don't know a thing. I'm actually unemployed. Now, none of that is stated, but it is shown through the direction and through what we know of the character. And I think that's awesome. Like, you can break this movie into so many different parts and kind of really study it. Whereas you have Prendergast as kind of the two sides of the same coin. And in Prendergast, he's also had this life-altering event. Defense is, as we would later find out, he has been laid off from his job, and he is divorced, and he is just like struggling to try and figure out what that means. Whereas Prendergast, he suffered through the sudden random death of his child through SIDS, infant death syndrome. I don't know if they still call it that. I think it has a new name. But in the movie, it's sudden infant death syndrome. Just all of a sudden, his child died at like 2. It's just one of those random horrible acts of God, as it were. And it's just sort of a discussion of like, well, Defense goes on this rampage. Prendergast goes and he's like, well, how can I rebuild my life? How can I switch things up a little bit? And, the idea is, I'm going to go to Arizona with my wife. This is where she wants to go. I'm going to kind of do this for her, But, he's going through his own little sort of transition period where he has to think about a lot of things.
I want to say Schumacher did a great job with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The screenwriter himself, from what I understand, the script was very similar to what we got in the final product. It wasn't like The Lost Boys, where Joel basically took an axe to everything.
Right.
But I think that, there's still a lot of Joel that still shines in the final product here, right? The set design is amazing. The costume design is amazing. And you know what? Credit to Joel. He has some very great shots in this. I remember there's a lot of great tracking shots in this. Which,
oh my God. The scene where he walks onto the Whammy Burger parking lot from above. You just see the whole shot of him from above. And you just see him pause on the giant chalk or painted burger. As
insane as it might be, you can draw an easy line from the opening parts of The Lost Boys, where we go from, the ocean to the pier, and then also the first-person view as they swoop down and get the guard, to, all these scenes here where, we'll go through an entire house. We'll go through an entire restaurant.
So I want to talk a little bit about this. This is kind of an unusual connection here. But as you know, one of my favorite movies is The Warriors. I did not watch the theatrical cut of The Warriors until this year. And one thing that really struck me was in the theatrical cut, it's a lot easier to tell where the Warriors are from point A to point B. And this movie has kind of the same really, really, really great thing where at all times at what point in the journey, William Foster is on. And that is kind of part of the point, is that Prendergast is literally tracking him on a map. But remember The Lost Boys and just how strong that final scene was because of how well set up that house was. That is something that I think Joel is getting really, really, really good at by this point in his career, is
making connections.
Yeah, making connections.
There's an insane one in the final couple scenes.
Yes.
I don't want to spoil it right now, but it is once you get to that moment, you're like, holy shit, the entire movie built to this part.
Yes, and just oh my God, going from point A to point B. And you realize where everyone is in this town, in this city, in this area, and it's cool.
God, this movie is so good.
Yeah, and the movie was shockingly good. I just want to say, man, I was not expecting to enjoy this so much the second time.
Yeah,
around.
no, I enjoyed this more revisiting this and especially analyzing it.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, on that note, it is insane. The lack of reading comprehension that we had in the 90s, right, with this, right? You were mentioning that you wanted to get into this. I want to get into this. So Fight Club and Starship Troopers both got taken and misinterpreted by the people they were making fun of. I don't know if it's as intense with Falling Down, but there's definitely people who agree with Defense and consider him to be the hero of the film.
Especially when you get to the Whammy Burger scene. Because, absolutely, let me tell you something. He's not in the right here. I work customer service now. I swear there's going to be a lot of people who come in here are going to be super, on Defense's side that, because he goes into the burger shop and is like, well, why can't I order breakfast? Because they don't serve breakfast anymore. It's past 11:30. But I want breakfast. The customer is always right. No, motherfucker! If I have one fantasy about this scene, it's being the manager who, gets to, tell this guy to fuck off.
This is, the fear of every single kind of service worker, I want to say. Somebody pulls out a gun on you because you're serving the wrong person.
Yeah.
Because, if you do work in service, you'll know exactly how it is. There are a lot of people who will take things very personally. Mm-hmm. So which is why you always have to, put on a brave face and everything. There's a song, it also reminded me of an Electric Six song that I've been listening to pretty regularly recently called Down at McDonald's, which is about a bunch of people who are working at a McDonald's who just inexplicably end of the night as they're closing up shift just a bunch of people break in and then hold them hostage with guns. It is hilarious.
Oh, it's such a funny... Hey,
it's also a banger.
Oh, it's so good. It's been in my head, too. And I want to say this about the lyrics to that song. I'm sure you noticed this when looking up the lyrics. Did you see that they permanently misspelled everything related to McDonald's so that they wouldn't get sued?
Yes. It's literally McDonald's. It's McDonald's with a Z.
With a Z, and Golden Arches with a Z, and stuff like that.
It's Ronald McDonald.
Ronald McDonald.
It is exactly like that.
Anyway, listen to the song.
Yeah, no.
But let's break down this scene for a little bit more than just... So again, he is a belligerent kind of customer. You have the cashier who's kind of thinks, oh, is this a joke? You have the manager who's like trying to explain, no, sir, we do not serve breakfast. And there's this part where he's like talking about being on first name basis because, behind the counter, the manager has the name tag that says Rick. I think it was Rick.
That sounds right.
And
I remember Sheila.
Yeah, Sheila, Rick and Sheila. And it's like, we're not on first name basis here is what, Defense says, It's like, don't you think that's messed up that I've known you for 5 minutes and yet I'm talking to you by your first name or something. He's trying to, break all this down. And it's so funny because after he pulls out the gun and threatens people and all of that to get his breakfast, he eventually just doesn't want the breakfast. He just gets a burger. Oh, and not after. Oh, he rants about how the burger looks versus how it looks on the picture. And it's like, none of these are gun-worthy crimes, guys.
Like the thing is, yes, there is like some relatability on this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you get some things, and they don't look exactly how it is in the picture. You want to complain about that, but like, he's literally complaining about it with a gun in his hand.
Yeah.
Like, it is very...
Like, you have the power here, buddy. You're not the one...
Everybody is frightened here.
Yeah.
Fun fact, actually. The restaurant worker is played by Dee Dee Pfeiffer, Michelle Pfeiffer's actual sister. So that's a fun little Batman connection.
Oh, that is fun.
Obviously, Catwoman was Michelle Pfeiffer, and Joel Schumacher would direct the next 2 movies after this.
That is pretty fun. But I gotta say about this scene, Joel Schumacher knows how to do some really good camp and really good kind of funny bits, even during really tense parts.
It is
just the pace of the scene. There's a part where he goes, I don't think she likes the special sauce, Rick. And it's just, what delivery. Michael Douglas in this movie is amazing.
Oh, absolutely. No, I haven't talked about it enough. Michael Douglas's performance, honestly, Oscar worthy.
Yeah, he is so stiff and unnatural, and yet just you can feel like, this anger and this rage bubbling under it, but there's so much more to that only gets more pronounced as the movie goes on, which again, people love to be fooled by a charismatic and good actor doing a good performance. He's not the good guy, but this is a great scene because it is tense. It is a little scary. I mean, especially again, if you have retail experience, it's a little funny, and there's enough there that you're like, well, you can kind of understand, well, yeah, sure, we'd all love to get really mad at I'm sure we've all had annoying customer service interactions, but this is an outsized reaction to not getting your whammy omelet,
I think the thing is, we laugh at this scene because we know it's fictional.
Yeah.
What we should remember, there was the scene in Nope where they talk about how the monkey went on the rampage in Nope and killed all those cast members.
Terrible.
And then, the one survivor of that incident talks about watching the SNL skit later, where, they made kind of like a funny skit over it. And like, that is why, like that level of disconnection that you have, the way the Hollywood one, like that's the thing that actually makes the scene like somewhat funny. Obviously, if this was in a real situation, everybody would be scared out of their mind. The way that he delivers the scene, like that is why I think that this scene works.
Exactly. And
the characters in the movie take it seriously too. This is like this is not like a joke scene.
Yeah, no, this is not a joke to the characters. This is not a joke scene, but it's a really intense scene with a lot to say. And from there, and what I like about it is it justifies Whammy Burger. Again, we're talking about these two sides of the same coin, because it immediately justifies the Whammy Burger scene with Prendergast at a nicer restaurant with one of his co-workers on the force, having, a nicer meal. It's not like the fanciest restaurant. It's like, having a corporate meal. And there's just sort of this justification between the conversation they're having in their restaurant and the conversation that is happening with Michael Douglas in Whammy Burger.
You mentioned London Bridge and how you never noticed the connection. They literally mentioned in this scene exactly about how the London Bridge got moved to Arizona.
Yeah, the London Bridge was moved to Arizona, and that's where his wife wants to go. And you kind of get and this scene is really cool because you kind of get the idea that Prendergast and this other this coworker kind of flirting with each other. But the last thing, they get called, they hear about the Whammy Burger incident. And the last thing Prendergast says to her is, there's one more thing I haven't told you about my wife. I love her. And it's such a really beautiful moment. Like, just this kind of, like, look, yes, I'm not saying that uprooting my life and going to Arizona is perfect for me right now or anything, but I want to do this. I want to roll with this and make a change to make others happy, because I can be happy at the same time in my own ways. It's like, it's nice.
Genuinely, like the scenes with Duvall are genuinely very sweet. He has some problems too, but that's all part of the overall story. Again, gray areas. It's very important that there's a lot of gray area for even the good guys in this. How many times are they constantly at each other's throats? How many times are they, obviously in the wrong? Duvall is probably one of the nicest characters in it, and even he, there's a lot of scenes with, again, the lady cop character. She has a lot of, choice words for him that, you can see him as, backing down a little too much, giving up for too much for himself.
Mm-hmm.
It is very good.
And then this is the part where you get the not economically viable protest, which is going to be very important. Because the thing is, Michael Douglas is looking for a gift for his daughter for her birthday. That's why he's going home. And on his way to the street store where the stalls where he goes, he finds a snow globe with London Bridge in it, which I think is pretty funny, pretty interesting. And God, there's so much, the street art and the graffiti, and so much of this scene is just pure Joel. There, like I said, there's the earlier there was the street art of Jesus, there was the Whammy Burger painting, there was just absolute, and every corner there's some kind of iconography going on, and it is gorgeous to look at, and it feels very intentional.
Joel may not have been raised in Los Angeles; he's a New York boy, but there's a lot in this film, The Lost Boys and St. Elmo's Fire, that tells you that, California is really in his veins.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I really must say this, because around this time, there's a scene where William Foster is looking for another phone booth to call his wife again. And it is here where we see something incredible.
Yes, so let me talk about this. I'll take over from here.
Please.
There is a jerk that is complaining that Foster's taking way too long in the phone booth. Foster steps out and is about to destroy it. However, before that, there's a scene between Foster and the jerk. In the background is a giant inflatable ass. Sir Mix-a-Lot's logo is on it. It is between a Subway and an El Polo logo. Once you recognize that it's there, you're not able to look away from this ass.
Yeah, it is huge. And Sir Mix-a-Lot's logo, at least on the Blu-ray, is very prominent.
You can probably guess this was a stunt to promote Baby Got Back. Funny enough, it's this prop, however, that actually dates the film filming. So this could only have been filmed in April of 1992 when the stunt took place, which, lines up with exactly what we heard with the protests.
Yes.
What happened at the time. But yeah, the inflatable ass right there is...
The inflatable ass and the Rodney King riots being the two things that just definitively date this film is unbelievable. Talk about
insane.
Two completely disparate things that could have only happened around each other's time.
Absolutely.
But I want to also say that as we were talking about this, because I remember seeing the Sir Mix-a-Lot ass, and something clicked in my mind like, wait, wasn't this like the only proof that this happened? Or something like that. I don't think that's completely true, but it was something like that, like definitive proof. And we paused the movie for you to like look up the details of all of this so that we would not forget this. And as you paused it, he shows him like he shoots up the phone booth just because to get even with this guy who was complaining that he was taking too long. In the background, there is a neon sign for a local bakery that says, "We bake our own bread." And I don't think this was an intentional, like, Easter egg or intentional piece of set design, but I do think that maybe subconsciously Joel was like, yeah, this is the perfect shooting location, because I think that's really cool. There's just this neon sign talking about baking your own bread in kind of this movie about, I don't know, it's interesting to me about kind of making your own way, but not really, I don't know. It's just a little bit of one of those weird background details that really stuck with my brain.
It makes you think.
It makes you think.
Just when you think the formula for this movie might get repetitive, we go to a weapons store that is run by a neo-Nazi.
Oh, man. God, it's so weird.
And whereas every single person that Defense has come across, they, like everybody else, has been scared of him. This guy, absolutely not. He trusts Defense immediately because he sees this man and he's like, oh, so this is like a straight-laced conservative kind of guy. This guy is my kind of person.
We're one of these. Because in the military store, because Defense goes, I believe, to get some new shoes, just some new duds, basically. And before this, we do kind of realize, this is a movie about two characters who just want to go home for completely different reasons, and it's funny because the wife, Prendergast is shown again talking to his wife, who is frustrated because he's not home yet, and it's like, oh, they're gonna get you a stripper for your final day. I know they will. But yeah, he goes to this store for some new duds, and in the store there's a gay couple. Oh, you can tell because... So the neo-Nazi gun store owner says, he says a slur. He says the F slur for gay people. And there are two guys shopping in there that, like, look around and look into the camera. Well, not literally into the camera, but, are very clearly upset because they're the people he's talking about. That's a fun scene that, like, they knock over his sunglasses display as they're leaving.
This is one of the few times I think definitively you can say that Defense is meant to be kind of in a heroic role, all things considered, at least comparatively, maybe not heroic.
Yeah.
But he's seen as better than this guy.
Well, that's the thing. It's so interesting because, Michael Douglas, through this movie, is a terrible conservative. Like, Defense is... a terrible conservative. We've talked about him. He's kind of an asshole. He's a racist, But a lot of it is kind of like, well, it's microaggressions or it's just nasty day-to-day society stuff. But at least he's not this guy.
There's a very good scene. There's a very good line that he has, which is basically right as things are building to a confrontation between the neo-Nazi and defense, where he says, "We are not the same. I am an American and you are a sick asshole."
And it's kind of funny to think how times have changed with, how, I don't think that times necessarily have ever changed. I think that always the goal of a lot of these people is to be, to other people. But they are very much more overt now and kind of have taken over.
It reminds me of this one comic where they had a crossover between Marvel and DC.
Mm-hmm.
Joker finds out that Red Skull, who he's been working with, is a Nazi. And as soon as that happens, he's like, well, fuck this guy. He says, I may be a monster, but I'm an American monster.
Yeah.
And that is basically like the character here. Like, this is defense. He is somebody who is the idealistic kind of 50s American type guy. So he is, in his mind, America is won World War II. He doesn't like, he's not necessarily going to agree with this guy just because, they have maybe some of the same targets. He hates this guy too because he's a Nazi.
And that's interesting because it kind of shines a light on kind of what he thinks is acceptable racism. And it's like, no racism's acceptable, right? You're not that different from this guy, no matter what you might think. He was right to kill the guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
in the movie. But, it's like, dude, you don't really have as big of a moral high ground to stand upon than you think you do.
I think the scene where he handcuffs, where he goes to handcuff defense, like, yeah, exactly, like, this guy isn't going to make it out alive, and frankly, he shouldn't.
Yeah. And, he also destroys the snow globe that Defense bought for his daughter, so.
Yeah. So
that's interesting, because I think that is the thing that sets Defense off, is like, well, it sucks that he's a neo-Nazi, but, now he made it personal. And it's like,
Of all things, it is his first real kill in the movie.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't kill any of the gang members.
No.
The most he does is shoot one of them in the leg.
Yes, he does that.
He also, he'll threaten people with guns. But, like, this is sort of the point where, like, guaranteed there's no return for him.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to mention in this scene, one of the details in the back of this neo-Nazi's storeroom, the back of his storeroom, he just has like a Santa Claus with a little neo-Nazi armband, which there's so many details added in the background of these movies that are clearly just meant for the overall themes, and also, the getting into the head of the characters through their room that I'm noticing here.
And that is so cool. There's that giant animatronic Swiss Army knife.
Yes. There's the skull, but like even going back to what we've seen too, think about, I mentioned the skull on the TV with the boys' apartment room in St. Elmo's Fire, and then, how much did we talk about the Lost Boys hideout and Jim Morrison's portrait being right there, because it all related to, the overall themes of the movie. You look at how at neo-Nazi Santa, literally another example of modern capitalism, consumerism, and, racism in current day society.
And how it's all kind of inexorably tied, which is something I didn't really talk about, because it does come back later. One of the things you see in the traffic jam scene at the beginning of the movie is this weird advertisement for laundry detergent with like a sexy woman, but it says something about white. I don't remember exactly what it says, but it says like white gets the stains out or something, like something really kind of uncomfortable. And then it zooms in and someone is graffitied like a guy trapped in her boobs, R. Crumb style. But like, there's just something weird about this. And I think that is intentional, especially when paired with like the neo-Nazi Santa, of just sort of this tying together of just like, look, the issues are not person to person. The issue is everything that is surrounding us, that has caused kind of this boiling pressure cooker of a situation. And again, with Michael Douglas looking for targets to lash out against.
You think about this scene, I think it really exemplifies everything up until this point. So the screenwriter of this film believes that this film is about the death of the old way of America and needing to accept it, or, you're going to fall behind, basically. That's why, again, Foster's has that 50s businessman look. It's a very adapt or die kind of movie. I'm oversimplifying here, but
of course,
yeah. To me, I'd say this film is about how we do have to tolerate some of the horrible injustices we're thrown in society and make sure we know how to pick our battles.
Yeah,
and how to pick our battles.
Let's be frank. That can suck sometimes.
But there's multiple ways to do it.
Yeah.
I'd say the one protester who unfortunately gets arrested, like he's doing things, at least, right. All things considered.
Yeah, he's doing things that, are effective and meaningful.
He is standing up for himself. Maybe it just ends in him getting arrested, which sucks. But at the same time, he knew he knew what it was going to lead to.
And meanwhile, protests are great. There's going to be thousands of them. Keep it up, And compare
that to William Foster, Defends, who goes on this huge tear no matter where he goes.
Like, who is he really affecting here? Himself and his wife and, like, a store owner. Like,
his problem is he just can't stop. Every single time he's met with adversity, instead of just, backing down, he just refuses. He's had a bad enough time as it is. Everything just keeps building. Oh, you know what? I was stuck in traffic, so just let me get this Coke. I need to also pay for a phone call that I need to do, and I don't have a lot of money on me. And then, everything just leads to another problem of his. And instead of, just walking away at any time, he always steps up. He always causes problems.
Absolutely. And it's great. And then we get to that great line where he says, I've passed the point of a journey where it's faster to go to the ending than it is to turn around and go back. Do you know what the point of no return is? And it's a great little speech. And by the way, before this, there was almost a title drop. Yes, I know London Bridge is falling down is the real title drop, but there is a point where he's fighting with the neo-Nazi, and the neo-Nazi's like, "What you gonna do to me?" or something like that, or "What's gonna happen?" And he's like, "I'll fall down." And then, that's when he kills the neo-Nazi with the butterfly knife. So,
that scene is so good too.
Oh, it's so good because it's so good that the scene of him with the cracked glasses staring into the camera is what they used for the cover of the Blu-ray. Though I prefer the theatrical poster. The one on Letterboxd is great, where it's a long shot of him just standing with the briefcase. It looks great.
That one is actually, I believe, in the scene out with the field, if I remember correctly.
I believe so.
The one that happened earlier. Yeah. That's another example of the themes about, like, picking our battles too, like the gang members who try and shoot up Foster, and then they just end up crashing their car and dying because of it. Like, it's not just him is the thing.
Absolutely.
But
that's what I say about this kind of Rube Goldberg machine of a plot, and it's cool.
So you mentioned that scene with William Foster just on the phone where he talks about this.
Yes. Oh, by the way, before we continue, I do want to say I found what the billboard said. It says white is for laundry. I don't know. Something about that just makes me deeply uncomfortable. But continue.
Yeah, I get you. So we get a really good transition between William Foster around this point and then also William Foster's kid. We see her watching a cartoon featuring a lion swinging around a club exactly like her father did.
Yes.
And then also, while that's happening, she's using a water gun at the screen.
Yes, exactly. God.
Like literally the exact violent behaviors that her father has
Yeah.
are being seen kind of in this scene in like the most playful sense.
Yeah, in the most playful sense. It's fascinating. And while this is happening, Foster's wife is on the phone with him, where, he's giving her the point of no return speech and gives her this horrible line where he says, did you know that in certain South American countries it is legal to kill your wife if she insults you? And it's like, dude, I'm sorry, audience, but at what point is this the good guy?
Yeah.
Like, who the hell says that? But then again, that is the difference between, you look at his kind of view of his ex-wife versus Prendergast's view of his family.
I think that's the thing. Like, again, it's very similar to Starship Troopers. So much of Starship Troopers paints you so much in the viewpoint of the characters, which, what they do in the movie is pretty damn despicable.
Yeah.
They basically take this one arguable terrorist attack that may or may not have been real, but seems like it may have just been an excuse for them to go to a war that they've already wanted to have. And then, so throughout the movie, it's one of those things that this is like obviously meant to be a propaganda piece. Like, if you look very deeply into it, you start to realize that in Starship Troopers. And that's the thing, like, as this is all playing out, William Foster's character, again, they focus on these real-life grievances that probably everybody has and how he just, takes it to them. And then that's like the whole thing. He's doing like it's a viewpoint thing.
Absolutely. And this is something that I think is
It's only as you start to like look at this out of context that everything becomes clear just how much of a fucked up guy this is.
And that's kind of the entire thing of the movie, is that it's a very slow zoom out. Because you have Prendergast, you have Foster, and it's slowly zooming out. And the more you learn about both guys, the more you kind of realize, like, no, this isn't right. And that's, again, why I think, looking at how Siskel felt about this film, how Gene Siskel was like, oh, this is just like any kind of, white guy revenge movie. It's like, dude, that's not the movie. That is not the movie. The movie is not about him getting all this revenge, because you don't even talk about, Duvall's character. And again, Ebert had a much more nuanced take where it's like about these two sides of the coins, which is, where we ended up with. And in this movie, you go back to the traffic jam and you realize that the whole thing is because of road work. And in Marx's writings, Karl Marx, he talks a lot about, to paraphrase it, the point of frustration with society will come to the point where people will be working in a factory creating parts for like things that they're never going to buy and maybe not even understand like what they're creating the individual parts for. And you get to the road work and listen, as we're in Ohio, I respect any movie that understands how frustrating road work is, because in Ohio, our national plant is the traffic cone. That's the official state flower. Blooms every summer. And so I get it, but like that's kind of the point of this frustration, is that you get all these minimum wage workers like the people at Whammy Burger, like this construction worker who knows, hey, I'm here guarding the road, we're fixing the road. Now we're not quite there where William Foster asks, well, what is there to fix? But I think this is kind of the point, is that, you have a lot of these kind of parts of society where we are all kind of told to like go do our thing and get the job done. And we don't always know why we do the thing. But at the same time, as you said, we should pick our battles. And it's like, is the war of freedom and against our oppressors going to be fought in the Whammy Burger because we don't serve all day breakfast?
Are you really going to fucking die on this hill?
Yeah, are you really going to die on this hill? And that's a whole interesting thing. And so from there,
I don't want to like so I don't want to like skip over some very funny scenes.
Oh, this scene.
there-
Okay, this does happen where I thought this does happen. Sorry, I got mixed up to where I was in the movie, but like in the movie where they return to the traffic jam and we learn it's because of the construction work. And they give William Foster a bazooka.
The scene with the kid instructing him how to use the bazooka is probably one of the funniest scenes.
Oh, it's hilarious.
In the entire film.
Oh, it's absolutely hilarious. Because this kid learns how to use a bazooka from movies and TV. Which, again, think about like what William Foster's kid is watching in the cartoons and stuff. So there's this kid who goes up and Foster's like struggling with this bazooka. And, puts it together and, again, talks to this construction worker, is this, what are you doing? What is wrong with the road? I didn't know the road needed fixing, kind of thing. And he accidentally fires a shell into the sewer and completely demolishes a bridge. Terrible for infrastructure. But holy shit, he's making more problems for the city, for infrastructure, for people.
And like immediately following this is the golf course scene.
Yes.
Which, that one is, again, like very funny in a dark level. They talk about how we got golf courses that should be like, I think parks is what he said.
Yeah, he's like, what their kids should be playing here. And, I don't think he's wrong. I think golf courses are a little bougie. Before that, though, I want to talk a little bit about one more thing that shows the difference between Foster and Prendergast is Prendergast and his detective team go to Foster's mother's house, which is where they learn that his name is William Foster because of his license plate. Defense! So what's interesting about Foster's mother's house is that it's full of tchotchkes and little things. And you see Prendergast, like, the way that he kind of gets information about, from the mother is by showing genuine interest in her, like, little collectibles. And I think that this movie is a lot about kind of these human kind of interactions versus kind of rage against the macro, which is something that I wanted to point out because it directly goes into what we were talking about with the golf scene. If you want to talk about everything about the golf course of, Foster going onto this golf course and complaining that it's huge and, you could bulldoze this and have children's parks and everything.
It's probably the most evil that he gets up to that point.
Yeah, he's just being a vindictive little guy at this point.
I didn't want to dwell too much on these scenes, though, because I think the real highlight here, like, this is mostly just straight up a chase for him.
Mm-hmm.
And it eventually leads to him in this pool area with a family that shouldn't be there. It's not their house.
Yeah, it is a plastic surgeon's house. And it really is interesting because it kind of juxtaposes the plastic surgeon's house and how big it was with, Foster's mother's house, where they're finding more information about who William Foster was, how he was happily married, how he was happy once. And at some point, he and his mother, their relationship fell apart, that, he started living with his mother. And of course, he's a defense contractor. He, learning that he's a defense contractor makes perfect sense. Of course, he's a defense contractor. He feels like the type. If you know, you know. But, and I think that's itself something really, really interesting. Because it's funny because, like, we're getting this scene of Prendergast kind of uncovering all these minute details about William's mother, about Foster himself, as Foster is, like, furious that a plastic surgeon has this mansion and, goes and kills the old man of a heart attack. And he go, or the old man's like, "Get out of the way, four!" And Foster grabs his gun and goes 5. Or something like that.
He threatens him with the gun, and the man has a heart attack.
Yeah.
And also,
but then
Foster's character sends their cart flying into the lake.
Yeah.
And the cart just happens to have his heart medication.
Right.
So,
but then, in the plastic surgeon's house is the part where it all kind of comes.
This is the scene that really changes everything in the plot.
Absolutely.
We knew that he had anger issues. His wife says as much. But this explains why the guy is acting up so hard right now, just speed running a GTA run today. He had been fired for the last week on what is supposed to be the day of his daughter's birthday. Yeah. The one day that was, supposed to be good for him. The one thing he was looking forward to. Everything has snowballed. All he wanted to do was get a present and get there.
Yeah.
But, he gets stuck in traffic. He gets into constant confrontations. People threaten him. He threatens them back. He can't even get breakfast when he wants to.
Yeah.
Every little thing he is lashing out at.
And it's interesting to talk about kind of looking at this as sort of a radicalization kind of thing. Again, we've talked a bit about how he's just kind of lashing out at everything that isn't him, because it's convenient when you are screwed by the system, when you are screwed by everything and you're miserable and frustrated. It's easy to pick a target and lash out at it. And that is unhealthy. That is unhealthy. That is not good. And that is, again, the difference between those two is that Prendergast still allowed himself to kind of understand humans, whereas Foster's convinced the world is a beyond saving.
I love how they just don't make either man like a caricature. They're not like the cop and the criminal. And then, the thing is, Foster is desperate, but they never just make him into straight up an alt-righter. He does have layers. They also don't make him out to be, an anti-hero. He is absolutely not an anti-hero. He is the villain.
And yet, you feel for him that he's not, that he was let go from his contract for not being economically viable.
And the part where he goes home to watch family videos in silence.
Oh, he does.
So his wife and his daughter have left the house because they know that he's coming.
Yeah.
While he's there, he finds the family videos and just keeps rewatching them over and over.
Of when he was younger, when he was happier, when he had his family, when he had his job.
And at first it seems very nice, but even he sees as his anger issues comes out, and instead of
this is amazing.
What's amazing is you can tell on his face that he's recognizing, oh my God, so I really did this.
Am I the bad guy?
Yeah, there's an obvious emotional realization for him.
It is so good because the scene is already incredible with him watching these family videos on this beautiful flickering CRT as he just suddenly realizes, I've been kind of a jerk, because it kind of flashes back to previous birthdays with him and his kid where, he's being hey, get on the rocking horse when she clearly doesn't want to, or they're at the pier that, he has all these fond memories of, and you kind of realize, hey, maybe they weren't all rosy like you thought they were. Maybe everything isn't going to be perfect just because you've gone back to the pier. And
yeah, you think about the suit, the hyper American man, the 50s American man, nowadays, modern day.
Yeah, and
it's looking back also and realizing that time frame wasn't at all. It's the same thing that we see constantly. That time frame, so many people remember it very fondly, but was it all good? No. And there's definitely a lot of terrible things.
And that's what's so fascinating about this movie being a 90s movie, showing how brown and ugly the 90s really were in that regard. I kind of love that. It's somehow this perfect accidental time capsule as well as an exploration of itself. It's crazy. It really has aged so well in that regard as sort of hey, look back at the 90s. Maybe we shouldn't be so rosy about this. And you get to see that in the scene where he talks about, one of the last calls he makes to his wife before she leaves the house and he goes to watch the videos is talking about, I'm at the old ice cream place we used to love, and they've changed it to some kind of new age bullshit store, I think is what he says. And from there, it's really great because or a souvenir shop is what it changes. And it is really funny because at that time there's a bunch of Hare Krishnas around. And I want to tell a story about when I was in college. A Hare Krishna once got me to buy $40 worth of books I never read. Because he just cornered me in one of the union halls and was gave me these books and says, so you're going to donate to the Hare Krishnas? And I think at my time I was like, oh yes, I study multiple religions, I can totally do this. And then I never read the books. But yeah, he just talks about being in this shop, and the ice cream shop in question before it closed down and was turned into the souvenir shop does actually show up in one of the home videos as he's watching them. And it's just fascinating to kind of look back and you see, again, that this time on the pier wasn't perfect, that it wasn't great, even though he wants to believe that it was.
Man, and so
a lot of it's his fault. So.
And so after watching those videos on the boardwalk, he heads there for the final stretch of the film.
And this is all I remembered about the movie. I mean,
in a film that is basically only good scenes, this is its absolute best scene.
Oh my God. The entire finale and final act of the film is... They spend this whole movie building to the time that Prendergast and Foster will meet.
And they make it work.
And it is perfect.
There are so many great lines here. Like you mentioned the scene earlier, but I'm the bad guy. How did that happen? Being one of William Foster's lines is fucking beautiful.
Oh, man. Yes. I'm going to be honest. I forgot he actually said that because, yeah, that's a little bit later, but it is truly a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful scene because and it is kind of fun. There's a lot of catharsis going on right here because on the way to the scene, Prendergast punches out the shitty cop for he was kind of a smug asshole for talking shit about his wife. And just I want to say about Michael Douglas, I don't think I've ever seen a performance like this. That's what's also really funny about, not to make this about Siskel and Ebert's opposing views of the movie, but Siskel talks about how, he doesn't see in Michael Douglas he didn't think it was that interesting a performance or that different a performance. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? I've never seen a character like William Foster in anything. He's not just an angry guy. He is so much. Just the layers, the depths, and the sadness to him is so fucking good. Because, and it's so tense. This scene is so tense because you're that it's Prendergast's last day on the job and he's rushing to the pier, and that, the wife and kid are in danger as William, because you've seen William Foster do terrible things all movie. And then when they finally meet,
they have heart to heart.
Oh, it's beautiful.
In a sense, just, explaining their personal stories, realizing that they are, in a lot of ways, the same person.
You know what I love?
But yeah, two sides of the same coin, as Ebert put it.
And you know what I love in terms of this? We've talked a lot in previous episodes about Joel Schumacher's amazing ways that he shoots the night and how gorgeous his nighttime photography is. This movie is all during the day, except the sun starts to set at this scene. And it is still stunning. It made such an impression upon me the first time we watched it, and I love it even more the second time. Of just this intense conversation, this scene, and Prendergast, oh my God. The scene between Foster and Prendergast, where Prendergast talks about his own memories of the pier and how things have changed, and he says, Could you believe that I used to fish here, and now you can't even swim in the water? How's that for sick? You know? Because they talk about how, you know, the sickness of society. It's just electric. And he says, you know, everyone has their own idea of what paradise is. You know, and it really is that kind of confrontation of the man willing to move forward and go to his next phase of his life, and the man who cannot give up his past. And it is beautiful.
Again, I still don't understand how Michael Douglas didn't even get like a nomination for this. I guess it's probably the same people. Like, unfortunately, Gene Siskel, who saw way too much, who thought that Michael Douglas was playing a hero, which he was absolutely not. There was so much intricacies of the writing. At the very least, you know, give him performance credit, and also maybe give the screenwriter a screenwriting credit, if nothing else. Not to take away from Joel here.
No, absolutely not.
But I think that they did a lot with this script and this character.
Absolutely.
And it is amazing.
Like they added so much depth to it.
Just to wrap things up, we do get a showdown between Defense and Pendergast.
Yeah.
Defense is saying that he has a gun in his pocket and he better shoot him before he pulls it out.
Man, and Defense, you know, like you said, the line, you know, I'm the bad guy. How did that happen? And he says, I did everything they told me to. And growing up during a time where our future was stolen from us, and everything we were promised, obviously it was never real. But I do think that there was a time where if you went to college and you know, did a internship or a small job for a little bit, you'd move on up in the world. You know, everyone had a path, and then at some point, all these paths just sort of were erased. And I think a lot of people found themselves in this situation. Obviously, they did back then. They're still doing it now. We keep going through these world-altering events. And there comes a point where you have, you know, the option to move on. The option to kind of fall down some terrible rabbit holes. I think that this is just an extremely powerful kind of finale. That I'm sure, you know, was powerful back then, but I do think that there is power in it today.
And I love the punchline.
Oh, man.
I was talking about how the best part, the best foreshadowed moment was yet to come. And as good as the butterfly knife scene is, I think this is it.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about the water gun, which, you know, was important from the part that we introduced it at, with, you know, the connection between the daughter and the father.
Mm-hmm.
So we see as the cop pulls out the gun and shoots Defense in defense of himself. We see as Foster pulls out the gun that he did have, which was a water gun. Yeah. He just wanted to be shot.
It's so beautiful because, like, before they do the showdown, Defense says, "It sure was hot today, wasn't it?" And as he's as he's shot, and just before he falls into the water, you know, he goes, "I would have got you." Man, honestly, what a spectacular finale. Like, it's funny because when we did this, we called it, when we first watched this movie, we paired it with Swiss Army Man, and we called it Metal Gear Solid Night, as this was Metal Gear Solid 1 and Swiss Army Man was Metal Gear Solid 2, and we refused to elaborate. And a lot of that has to do with kind of, I mean, the joke there is sort of the
long monologues.
The long monologues, the thematic meaning behind it all. And a lot of it had to do with this scene of just sort of that uniquely charged emotional kind of two sides thing ending in this final showdown between the two. And it's, you know, it's a good bit. You could probably break down further, but you know, it really does just remind me of this just absolutely beautiful, like, you know, showdown at sunset thing. And it's just, it really does move me extremely. Also, shout outs ACAB, because the cops that are in the neighborhood where Foster's wife is are fucking useless. The Venice cops are useless.
Also worth mentioning, the police chief that was talking shit about Duvall's character to his face on his final day, tries to take credit for him taking down the bad guy.
Yep. And Prendergast tells him to fuck you very much.
Absolutely, like a fantastic way for his character to get kind of one final last hurrah. As we go to our final shot, we do another tracking shot into the house, and the video that was playing earlier is still going on. We see the video of him and his family as they seem happy.
It is heartbreaking. What a final shot. It is so beautiful and so sad.
I have one last note on this movie, and that's that I had noticed that they had to credit Happy Birthday for You on the soundtrack. We live in an insane time frame.
Yeah.
Where, you know, nowadays I think not a lot of people know that is it only just recently fell into the public domain.
Yeah.
For years that they had to copyright any usage of Happy Birthday to You.
That's so funny. The thing I noticed in the credits was that there was first gay man and second gay man.
Shout outs
to the first and second gay man. The only two.
This movie is just so different from anything else I've seen Joel make beforehand. Is it my favorite? No, not in a world where the Lost Boys exist personally.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, this is maybe his most technologically impressive.
This was a surprise of a revisit, because we liked it. We didn't not like it, but it just felt so much deeper and more powerful than I was expecting upon second watch.
I'm going to make an insane comparison here.
Go ahead.
And I'll probably regret it 10 episodes down the road. But, you know, in many ways, I think Joel Schumacher's versatility as a director is maybe second to Takashi Miike, just off the top of my head.
Oh, wow.
Well, think about this, right?
No, I love that.
Now, I'll say Miike has directed over 4 times the amount of films as Schumacher. So, you know, there's no way I can actually call them equals in terms of their catalog. Like that's not a possibility. But, you know, what I love about both of them, they have a few genres in particular that interest them, but they never play safe, and they're always willing to try something new. You can teach this dog new tricks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Miike's take on Ace Attorney is such a unique film, because I don't think anyone else would have like approached it with the eye that he did. And that's kind of how I feel about Batman, or about, you know, these movies. You know, just they have their shocking variety in everything they do.
And there's so much. And, you know, he's made comedies, he's made coming of age, horror, legal dramas, superhero movies, psychological thrillers, musicals, crime films, war movies, action movies, romances, teen films. God, this one is probably up there as one of the best films of 93, maybe one of the best films of the 90s.
Yeah, and I mean that's a big swing, because the 90s had some absolute incredible films, like, and it's a great film that I think it is misunderstood, but I think if you really understand it, you'll really. Now, there is something hilarious that this movie ended with. At least on the Blu-ray. I swear, We were waiting and waiting to see if it would just go back to the menu or if it had more afterwards. And it did. It had about 1,000 FBI warnings in every known language.
I'm going to become William Foster in real life.
I'm going to become William Foster in real life by the point that we got to Estonian. Like, and it was weird because Italian was super late. I don't know how they decided on like what language to put where, but there were so many FBI warnings. It was like 5 solid minutes of FBI warnings.
You would swear that by like they would get to Pig Latin at one point.
Yeah. Every language under the sun in these FBI warnings.
All things considered, beautiful film. We should have gotten Dee Fens as a playable character in Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Can't say enough positive things about this movie. How about you? Anything else you want to add?
Not much. I do think that he's gonna be the next. They gotta add him to a fighting game. We need the weapon upgrade mechanic.
We can't get him in Tony Hawk Pro Skater, but you know what? Multiverses, you're still on the table.
Yeah, it is a WB movie. Put him in multiverses. You got Jason, you got Beetlejuice. Let's get William Foster.
Next one is a big one.
Oh, man.
I cannot wait for the next episode. It could not come at a better time.
Oh, absolutely. Like we've been hyping it up, and we're excited for Batman Forever. But that's next time because we're going to wrap things up. I want to say thank you, everyone who listens to this podcast. By all means, reach out to us. We're on Letterboxd. I'm Hard Like Aaron, and that is NB Witch. And, of course, come to armbarstudios.com for more information about this podcast and all of our projects. Please subscribe. We're on Spotify, YouTube, Pocket Casts. We have had a great time with this arc, and we're going to keep it up. But until next time...
3, 2, 1, roll credits.
Freaking Ranch, since you had a little controversy at the beginning with that song.
There was a lot of controversy with the song. A lot of people misunderstood the song. I'm glad you brought that up and I get to talk about it. A lot of people think the song was just about big asses. That's not what the song is about.
Roll Credits is produced by Armbar Studios and is part of the Aaron and Mandy Network. The intro and outro music is provided by Daniel Vodovos, available on Bandcamp. For more information on all of our projects, visit armbarstudios.com.